The following program is made possible by the Western Riverside Council of Governments, bringing local government together to strengthen Western Riverside County's voice in our region, our state, and our nation. And by Center for Sustainable Suburban Development, conducting and disseminating research on issues of suburban growth and the impact of this growth on social, environmental, and transport systems.
I think you will enjoy and be inspired by the presentation by Julia Parzen. Julia, the microphone is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I actually wrote down a few of the phrases that really stuck with me from the presentation this morning. One was coping with very rapid change. A second was a place people will love. A third was $2 billion in cap and trade funds. And the fourth was make it so. But how do you make it so? Not such an easy thing to do. Going full circle back to the first presentation, one of the comments Ed made is it can't be done with a business as usual approach. Sustainability is something I have found attractive through my whole career. I actually started working at the Environmental Protection Agency in DC, but on developing venture funds for environmental innovation. And then I came to the state of California and went to the Department of Business and Economic Development, but I was working on creating vehicles for solar home improvement loans, for secondary markets for solar. This was in the first round of solar, before that collapsed. But there were lots of opportunities to think together, economic development, environment. And what I'm seeing now is many more people recognizing the potential of looking across fields to find solutions. These are hard times for local government. Less money, no economic development funds, more problems in terms of the environment, in terms of a recovering economy and slowly recovering housing markets, and not a lot of resources. So how do you start to tackle this? And why I love sustainability is not about the particular projects like EV infrastructure or transit-oriented development. I mean, those are great. But what I love about it is the opportunity that comes from thinking in a more holistic way about how to improve the quality of life in a community. That there's a chance to address stormwater runoff and park development at the same time. And it could cost less than doing either one individually. Sustainability, building those structures for connecting across departments, for figuring out solutions together, is part of improving the adaptability of local government. You can come to solutions faster. I mean, the way that most innovation happens is by crossing boundaries between fields. If people aren't talking to each other across functions, you can't do that. So when 6 years ago, I was invited. I was the outside program manager for developing the Chicago Climate Action Plan, which was the first climate action plan in the United States that integrated adaptation and mitigation. And I was talking to the chief environmental officer for Chicago, and he was saying, things are changing so quickly, I don't have enough chance to talk to my peers about how to make this happen. How can I play a productive role in making the connections in my city that are gonna mean more resources, better solutions, and improve the environment at the same time? So we started to create this network, and It was made up of people who really saw the opportunity. And in my first slide, I point to both a very large city and a smaller city, and their mayors saying, I'm looking at sustainability as an opportunity. I'm seeing what the people in my community are asking for. I'm seeing that there are resources connected to this. I'm seeing that I can build a broader set of stakeholders. I'm seeing that you can go from a first-year meeting for Grow Riverside, or what's Riverside Grow, of 500 people, and the next year have 1,000 people. And how am I going to harness the support necessary to keep up with change? Wow, there's something here that says it's a pathway to building that kind of support. So, the network, just a tiny bit about it. I mean, the first thing is, this is just the dots that show where all the network members are. And I have been to that Waffle House in Fayetteville. It's pretty good if you like Waffle House. Fayetteville is one of the early leaders of the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. So is New York City. I mean, what do New York City and Fayetteville, Arkansas have in common? I mean, through their sustainability programs, they're working on all the topics you've heard about today, but they're also working on how do we help our city government become more adaptive so it can change? How do we help it become more efficient so it can get farther on the resources it has? How can we build broader support for our mayor, which is going to help his or her agenda proceed in so many ways? And the network, which I don't run anymore. I left it last February. I still consult to the network. I love to show this picture because that's really what I was doing for 5 years. These dots are the connections across about 130 cities in North America. And you can see at the beginning, people knew a couple of other people. They worked with a couple of other people. And then you can see in 2013 the depth of relationships. And why did they dedicate all of that time? Well, there's really two messages there. I mean, one is there's no point in going it alone. When you're trying to achieve change, you should take advantage of as many other people's experiences as you can. And the other is that sustainability is still new. It's changing really quickly. It doesn't have all established practices. And that's a time when you want to have lots of exchange. You want to have people from various cities coming together and learning from each other because that's going to accelerate the pace and improve the success. So after the 5 years, 2 of the leading sustainability directors in local government in the United States and I got together to say, can we capture the lessons? Not about, how do you fund EV infrastructure, but how do you make this change in local government to make sustainability a valued approach that everyone wants to be a part of, because it's going to make it easier for them to do what they want to accomplish. And Sadhu Johnston I had met in Chicago. He was the chief environmental officer for the city of Chicago. And Steve Nicholas, who now works with the Institute for Sustainable Communities, he had been the sustainability director for the city of Seattle. He actually was the person who worked with the mayor there to develop the mayor's climate protection agreement, which eventually, more than 1,000 cities signed. So we did this book in order to really capture how does this transformation happen in cities? I mean, you hear about all the projects you can do. It can seem pretty overwhelming. How does this hang together? How do you move it forward? And really, what a sustainability leader in local government is a change agent. And what I want to talk to you about today is how these change agents across North America have made progress, have really begun not only to do projects, which is really effective, but to make it the way business is done in cities. And a key part of that is you're not doing a plan and then forgetting about it. You're going from plan to plan and measuring results. There's a lot of parallels in the private sector around Kaizen, Six Sigma, TQM. Sustainability is about taking a systematic approach to managing the quality of life in a city. So what we did was we sat down, the three of us, with three very different perspectives. I had worked with these 130 cities, plus another 60 or 70. Sadhu had worked in both Chicago and now Vancouver. Steve had worked in Seattle and now also was working with cities. And we tried to distill out what really were the success factors for cities doing this work. And the list you see up there, that's what I'm going to talk about today. Just as an aside, because I'm going to go talk to a class later today, I wanted to go look at some of the literature about managing change. And I found there's a very popular article by a professor from Harvard. It's in the HBR case study materials. And I put side by side this list and that list. And I realized, I have been seeing this all my life. The way you make change that can be sustained, it is something fractal. It happens at every level. You're talking about your household, your street, your neighborhood, your city, your region, your state, your country. Change happens the same ways. And this is the new skill set, I think, that Ed was talking about cities are developing. So rather than go through the list, I'm just going to give you the examples. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is, cities, they've had a lot of difficult problems to deal with, and they've developed departments to deal with those problems. They've become more and more specialized. There's so much expertise in cities about how to handle problems. But what happens when you get that specialization is you start losing the chance to see a big picture. And really what sustainability leaders do in local government is they help to make those connections. They help people to see the bigger picture. They help people to start to experience it, and then they start to build the constituency for it. So it doesn't have to be a person who's called a sustainability director at all. Could be someone in the mayor's office, could be someone in a department, but at the beginning, you really need a person whose job it is to find these opportunities for connection. And it's very hard for that person to get anything done unless they have support from the top level. And I think we heard that this morning. People do, but it makes a huge difference. So one of the things I said earlier was that I think sustainability is an opportunity people should be looking at in local government, that I'm seeing people look at in local government, not just because there are mandates or requirements, but because it's an opportunity. And the opportunity to break down silos. So when Adam Freed, he was a friend from New York, was looking at stormwater runoff and flooding, and 30% of the impermeable area is streets. But what does the transportation department know about managing flooding using green infrastructure? Nothing, but the Parks District does. And it's his job to bring them together and have them sit down together to talk about what do they know, each of them, that they bring to that topic, and then develop ongoing processes. That's an opportunity, achieving a triple bottom line. I think that co-benefits, it's such an abstract word, but what I see over and over is when these conversations start to happen, and that's why I asked the question about the STAR Community Index, because to go through that whole planning process to get a STAR rating requires a lot of people to talk to each other. To do a resilience plan, if you do it right, requires a lot of people talking to each other. That process itself has a huge pay off. This is one of my favorite examples. You know, green infrastructure, well, it's still kind of exceptional. It's not that it's been adopted everywhere, but it's been adopted in a lot more places. And the idea behind green infrastructure is that, you know, if you use trees, rain gardens, other kinds of green permeable infrastructure, that you can capture stormwater where it is, and that's an alternative to putting in more sewer pipes, bigger tunnels. Well, so there was a person, Howard Newkrug, who worked not at the highest level in the water department, but had a lot of experience in watershed management. So he'd actually learned one of the key skills of sustainability already, which is how do you bring lots of stakeholders together to tackle a problem and make progress together over a sustained period of time. And he did this analysis. So we talk about co-benefits, but it's really hard to calculate co-benefits. Well, he went through a process of looking at, this is how much would it cost for the city to put in a new large tunnel. Here's an alternative where we would do improvements to waterways, build new parks, put in more trees, and the benefits were much bigger. And eventually this became the adopted approach for the city, but there needed to be somebody who was going to look at the problem in a different way. And part of what the champion for sustainability does in a city is find those people who are going to look at problems in a different way and support them. I gave Philadelphia as an example, but I just wanted to show Batavia, Illinois as well, just to say that this kind of solution at a different scale, it still works. This is a downtown revitalization project using green infrastructure, permeable pavers, to make a more appealing and downtown while also reducing stormwater runoff. But if you couldn't have the conversations across disciplines in a city, you couldn't have a solution like this. Well, the first co-benefit that a lot of cities look to is saving money. I mean, this is saving money can bring on a lot of support for an approach. And energy efficiency is one approach for saving money. And this is an example of a fund that was created by the city of Ann Arbor where the revenue and the energy savings are many times, a return many times higher than the cost of a staff person who manages energy efficiency in the office. And many cities I've seen, like Boston's another example where they did some of this early analysis. The mayor was so excited about it that they allocated 2 staff positions to continue to build this up, to build a system for tracking. But that starting point was a little fun to do the first projects. This is a revolving fund, so it doesn't have to keep being funded. As the projects are complete, they turn over. So the message there every day is energy efficiency is saving us money and providing capital to take on more and more projects. So that's one of the first early co-benefits. So I kind of feel like, let's see, for some reason all of my slide didn't come in here. So I apologize for that. I'll just have to tell you, I sat down and started to look at, if I were going to do an analysis for the Inland Empire of what are high-impact climate actions, where are co-benefits, and what are assets and opportunities, you know, I would look at something like LED streetlights, which I've seen in many of the climate action plans, and say, well, you're going to get lower city energy and maintenance costs. I can tell you about cities like Asheville, North Carolina, that have put part of those savings into a revolving fund, like the Ann Arbor Revolving Fund. But I'd also say, you know, we have local utility programs in this region. We have cities that have already done this, so I can maybe even take advantage of the technologies they've chosen, maybe even quantity reductions in terms of purchasing price. So where are these best opportunities? So that's what it's like to always be asking the question about co-benefits. So having a person is number one. Focusing and aligning is number 2. And the reason why that's so important is sustainability people, they work on everything: transportation, housing, economic development. It's pretty overwhelming. Where do you start? Having a plan and goals is really important. But it doesn't have to be a new plan. And just taking this Ann Arbor example forward, I wanted to stay with Ann Arbor for a little while. They just said, in our city, there is not an appetite to develop another plan. We're going to do something different. We're going to do a review of every existing plan we already have underway that has sustainability aspects to it. We're going to summarize those plans, because you know what? Everybody doesn't even know what's in them if they're not part of that functional area. Then we're going to bring together all the commissions and have them understand all these plans and choose together what are some overarching goals that we want to get together around as a city, and some overarching performance metrics. And we're going to continue to meet and move that forward. So there's nothing like seeing the work that you're doing elevated to a higher level with an opportunity to attract more attention. And I think that's been working really well for Ann Arbor. Focusing and aligning means also taking advantage of the opportunities in front of you. I mean, first of all, the first thing you want to look at is what is most important to the city leadership, what's most important to the council, to the mayor or city manager, because being able to connect to where a train is already going, but to modify the direction is a lot easier than starting from scratch. And then related to that is, what are the programs? I mean, we already, this slide was practically up already. I just tried to look at some of the things that were going on that if I were in a local government, I might try to connect to in order to not start from ground zero, not start from the first step, which I never want to do. The other thing is, if you're trying to advance the idea of sustainability, you've got to have some early wins. Actually, this is another one that somehow didn't come out. So I apologize to you. The slide is somehow stretched out and doesn't fit on the page. But we did a survey of USDN members. One of the valuable things we do that could be done through the COG, I think, is we periodically survey all the members. And one of the questions we asked them was, what were the things that you did that were relatively easy, that you encountered the fewest barriers, that could be a starting point? And if you look at the list, there's a lot of municipal energy efficiency, energy production, lighting upgrades. I mean, those are the things people often start with. We've heard a lot about those things at the beginning. So you're not going for the hardest stuff first, you're going for the easy stuff so you can build momentum. I mean, that's where the change process comes in. You're trying to build support in many, many little ways. And that's what sustainability leaders do. They also copy nearby successes. I mentioned the LED example again. Why do I want to build all the toolkit myself if I can look at someone else's toolkit? Yeah, I got it. I mean, if someone has a municipal utility and I don't, this may not work, but I can adjust and adapt. So I already have like 3 or 4 ways that I can decide where I'm going to start. It seems a lot more manageable than just looking at the whole picture. And not only have you decided where to start, but you've decided where to start where you're most likely to succeed, where you probably are going to have some supporters already to make it happen. Now, I worked for the city of Chicago for 3 years under Mayor Daley, the second Mayor Daley. We have dynasties too. And he always had a cigar in his mouth, unlit. It was kind of gross. He kind of chomped on it, and it was wet. And he would sit there with the cigar, and he would say, "Don't ask me to ask the people of Chicago to do anything if we haven't done it ourselves." And why is that so important? I mean, leading by example, it does so much. One is seeing things is believing them. So allowing people to see You have places where a new development was constructed, it was hugely successful, and other developers step forward and start to do something similar because they've seen the success. The other is you find out how hard it is to do things. You don't want to ask your local businesses or residents to do something that might be incredibly hard, but if you've done it already, you can say, here's how we handled this, here's how it works. We can help you through this process. We can design an approach that really makes sense. And one of the things that Mayor Daley loved more than anything, his favorite story was to point to the green roof. That's, the city of Chicago and the county, Cook County, share a building. But they didn't get along very well for a long time. And the mayor put a green roof on the city side of the building, but not the county side of the building. Well, that was their job to do. But he would get up at every speech, and he would say, the ambient temperature where people stand on the green side of the building is 7 degrees, on the city side of the building. On the county side, it's 120 degrees. So you can imagine the county board chair wasn't so crazy about that story. But the mayor built that green roof and put green roofs on other public buildings. And then as the story progressed, you had the Chief Sustainability Officer, Sadhu Johnston, going out to companies saying, we would like you to do green buildings too. And they would be like, don't talk to me about green buildings. I cannot get a permit for 100 days. This is so expensive. I got so much problems. Don't talk to me about this. So here he's the connector. Okay, so we're going to do a green permit in Chicago where we'll get you a permit in 20 days if you do a green building with certain features. But then the housing department came forward and said, well, we want to be part of this too. We want there to be some kind of affordable housing requirements. Anyway, they did modify it a little. They were trying to build this broader sense of what a green building is. And this program was extremely successful. The first green roofs were very expensive. Over time, they became less expensive. The green alley to the right of the green roof, at the beginning, that concrete cost like 3 times more than the normal cost, although there were cost savings because you didn't have to put sewer pipes underneath. First, there was 1 green alley, and then there were 5 green alleys. And as they worked on it over and over, the costs actually were no longer higher. So you first have to pilot on a small scale, you have to figure it out, and you have to make sure people see that because they'll be interested to see that happening. But, the city of Chicago helped build a new industry. There are a lot of concrete companies that are really happy now about having a new product line around this infrastructure. I wanted to say something quick, leading by example. Leading by example can also be within local government. So of course you want to share the successes of one department with every other one. But this is a great story. I just want to say it really quickly, which is Asheville, North Carolina negotiated a new rate with their utility for LED streetlights so they could actually save money. And we wrote up a case study about that, and a group of cities in Michigan saw that, and they took that and had a meeting with their utilities and came to an agreement on a new rate. And meanwhile, back in North Carolina, 24 cities statewide got together with the Municipal League and also negotiated for a new rate for all cities in North Carolina. So I think this is just another great story about how, first of all, great positive attention for Asheville as being a leader, but also the way an idea can spread if you know that it's happening. So the third is building relationships. So these sustainability people come in, and yeah, they get told, the mayor says, I want you to listen to this person, I want them doing this. But meanwhile, you can only go so far with that. You have got to start to build a constituency for this work. And also, if you don't build a constituency, it's always just going to be a project. It's never going to be the way of doing business. So, building relationships is really critical. And this is especially important for smaller cities because I just brought up, I mean, there's so many thousands of stories, but let's say you're going to have a new transit system or a new bus rapid transit, but you don't have the resources to do a station area plan for every station. So what are you going to do? Not do it? Do something global? Well, here's an example from Phoenix where they came together with a variety of local institutions, universities, other anchor institutions in the community who also had an interest, and they came up with a collaborative approach to doing that station area planning. So part of the role of this connector sustainability person in a city is bringing in partners who also bring in resources and also bring in support. Cincinnati Green Umbrella is another great example that I like to talk about because they didn't start from zero. There is something called the collective impact approach to action, and they just adopted this hook, line, and sinker, and they hooked in with their regional, equivalents of their COGS and their plans, and they have developed this systematic coalition that just goes from project to project, developing, regional bike sharing, green open space. And because they've built this infrastructure of people who know how to work together and they know they've got a bigger job than one project, it just is a gift that keeps on giving. Number 6 is be an enabler. What do cities have that they can use to enable other people to make progress? They have land, they have buildings, they have data, they have regulatory powers, they can provide incentives. Those things don't have to be marshaled in a vacuum. You can be out there finding out what is it that could move a project forward. What do I have? But you need to have somebody who makes sure you're asking that question. What do I have? And so just 2 quick examples. This is from Providence, Rhode Island. Have public land that's not being used. Partnered with a local land trust. Developing lands, partnered with the Economic Development Department and Workforce to do a job training program for unemployed people working on these farms, used it as a way to identify policy changes that need to happen to support urban agriculture, all those pieces. But the city's playing more of a coordinating role. It's not doing it all itself because it developed those partnerships. Data, a lot of cities are a long way off from requiring every business or every very large business to report on their energy data, but at least it's time for cities to be capturing the data on the energy they're using. And just by doing that and having voluntary programs to show other businesses how to do it, so that's another way to enable. The next one is cultivating leadership. You do not want to be the one in charge. I'll tell you, I can't believe how many sustainability directors have said to me, it's my job to get other people to take leadership. I may not even get the credit. They can go in a closet and scream how they've done all these things they can't get credit for. But if they're taking the credit, they are not doing their job. And so it's sending out other people to talk on TV, to be in the press, to take the lead. This is how you build buy-in. And Chicago, when we worked on the climate action plan, the people who advised on the plan, we knew what parts we wanted them to be involved in implementation. When we got to implementation, it wasn't a separate step to develop an implementation strategy. They were already primed. They're standing there behind Sadhu in that presentation. They know what their roles are in implementation. I was really thrilled to hear there's a new food policy council in the region. I just loved this headline, 6 powerhouse food policy councils driving local food in cities. How nice not to have to drive that by yourself from inside the city. How nice to have a council that's working with you. You may not control it completely, but you can set the parameters for it, but that's driving policy change. The next 8 is measure and report. As I started to research the region before I came out, I just kept finding things that cities were doing. But there was no way to know what impact they were having. I couldn't find that data. And I realized that, wow, if people could measure the results of what they're already doing, it actually might tell a very compelling story that would attract funding, that would build momentum and, support within the city. It is really important to measure and report. And I think we heard about one way to do that earlier with the STAR index. And I think the other thing about measuring and supporting is I mentioned that sustainability is really about taking a systems approach, but continuous improvement, you cannot do it if you can't measure. So unless you have a vision for what sustainability is and a way to measure progress, there's no way to know what your next step should be. You just don't know where the successes are to build on. Sharing stories and credit. Communicate. I mean, it's like location. It's so funny. People always think it's enough. Well, we're going to have an annual meeting and we're going to talk, but it isn't enough. You've got to be communicating about every success every day. You've got to be getting those people in front of the mayors who really contributed so that they get the attention and recognition that they deserve. If you do that, people will want that recognition, and it will help you identify more leaders. And you've already got some tools up. Oh, I guess there's a missing slide there too. Anyway, I was looking at, California green communities. That's one way. Beacon is another way to get recognition. STAR is another way to get recognition for a city. You've also got ways to give recognition for companies. You're going to hear about one program like that from one of the speakers on the panel of how they're recognizing companies. There was a big Booz Allen study done for the city of Chicago. How can we develop our green business sector? And they had this program and that program, incentive, da-da-da-da. And Booz Allen, their conclusion was, companies want recognition. They want to stand next to the mayor. They want to be known for what they do. So what's the last? So just two more. Tap into competitive instincts. We heard that earlier today, too. How many cities in this country are saying they're going to be the greenest city in the United States? They can't all be the greenest city in the United States. But it's a nice way to try to keep track of what you're doing and to be able to say you're doing better. And I think I already mentioned that. I guess I was early. So the last thing, which I think is really critically important, is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You want to do this project, but the mayor wants to do that project. Well, that's okay. You do that project first, and you'll come back to this. You can only get half as far, but you've built the demand. You've built the constituency. More is going to happen. So it's not so much about the individual project as it is about how your city, town is thinking about the next step. So that's it. That's the book in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you very much.
This program has been made possible by the Western Riverside Council of Governments, bringing local government together to strengthen Western Riverside County's voice in our region, our state, and our nation. And by the Center for Sustainable Suburban Development, conducting and disseminating research on issues of suburban growth and the impact of this growth on social, environmental, and transport systems.